Derrick Hall was built to be the bookend to our campus. Today it's
from
only
Old Main to Derrick.
Old Main to Derrick. That was all of Texas State. Today it's not only 1/3 of the way across the campus. We'll be removing that bookend and opening up the quad. That is going to be transformational. Those pictures in the master plan of what that is going to look like will blow you away.
Yeah. Hey Bobcats, welcome to The Current, where we had a chance to talk to faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends of the university to find out what's going on here at Texas State University. And I'm so excited today to welcome my friend Eric Algoe, Executive Vice President for, listed out because it's
Operations and Chief Financial Officer.
Chief Financial Officer. So he kind of runs the joint here. And so everything that happens at Texas State, we have a provost who runs the academic part of things, and we have a vice president over student success, but you kind of like run the ship, right?
It's the city manager
manager job, yeah, and so and the budget and so on. So I'm excited about having you here because we're going to talk about the master plan in a second here, which is really your baby. It's about really the future of what this place will look like in 10 years. But I want to learn more about Eric, and I know a lot about you, but our listeners don't. So let's go way back in the time machine about where you grew up, went to high school, and how did you end up being here, because you actually have a very fascinating story. So let's talk about hometown.
Sure. Hometown, I would say, is Plain City, Ohio, a small town outside of Columbus. When I lived there, there were still Amish buggies that would go up and down the streets. I moved there from Columbus, from the big city, and went to a high school where there were 89 kids.
You graduated in the top 89 that way?
I was in the top 100.
Yeah,
Let's
that's
just
good.
go with that. Went on from high school, went to Ohio State. At the time, I was first gen. I knew that I had seen Ohio State football on the PBS station. And so I knew that university existed. I didn't really know much about any other universities.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to Ohio State.
Was there a family connection there, or is it just because it was the state university? Or
no one in my family had ever gone to college. Really didn't have anyone to go to for advice about college. Just knew that seemed like the right thing for me to do next.
What'd your parents do?
My mom did all kinds of things, sort of raised me and my 4 brothers on her own as just a sort of working class. She held so many jobs over the years, I've lost track.
It's what people did back then, right?
Yeah, she did everything.
And still do that now. There are people who are doing that, just trying to make it happen.
Yep, and she's still doing it.
Yeah, good for her.
Today.
What was your plan when you went to college? Did you have one, or you're just going because you thought you should do something?
Yeah, I went to college to be a mechanical engineer. I had been
here. You are all these years later.
Yeah,
dream came true.
And had a vision that I would, maybe build rockets or build bridges or solve problems for the world. After about my freshman year of college, I lived in the honors dorm, which at Ohio State was the football stadium.
Oh.
So I actually lived inside of Ohio Stadium. They don't let people do that anymore.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. And I didn't do very well after that first year. I didn't know how to study. High school had always been easy for me, and I just sort of didn't take it very seriously. And so I lost the scholarship that I had after my freshman year. And family didn't have any money and didn't really know much about college. So I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do to stay in college and to keep this going? And I figured one of the things I needed was more discipline, and I thought, well, I think they teach you discipline in the military.
Yeah.
So maybe
that's how the military story starts.
Maybe I need to join the military. Went and found out more about that. Also, first generation military family, right? No one in my family knew anything about the military. So I ended up joining the Army. In the reserves as a psychological operations specialist. I was supposed to miss 1 semester of college, but while I was in basic training, President Bush drew a line in the sand in the Middle East, and I ended up staying on active duty for the next year as a part of Operation Desert Storm and other activities. So eventually came back into the reserves and came back to school. The Army, I don't know that they really taught me discipline, but maybe I just grew up a little bit. So Did 2 more years as a mechanical engineer before I realized, you know what, I'm a pretty average engineering student. I took this class, this elective in criminal justice, criminology, in fact, criminology, and was just fascinated by it. Greatest faculty member, Professor Llewellyn, I still remember him well. And I thought, this is something I endure engineering classes. I love going to this class. So I changed my major in my 3rd year and decided to be a criminology major. Went on to finish that and was going to go to law school. I joined ROTC in the meantime. I continued to be a drilling reservist. I was activated actually one more time and went to Bosnia. But finished college, finished ROTC, had asked for a reserve commission and had applied for and been accepted to go to law school at Ohio State. And the Army thought that wasn't the best plan for me. So they offered me, offer is a sort of maybe not the right word. They told me that I had an active duty commission. So I was commissioned as a military intelligence officer. Spent the next couple of years doing that on active duty, sort of traveled around the world, was stationed in Germany and in Korea, longest 2 tours. Came back and got back into the reserves.
And then what happens?
Then what happens is I don't really know what I'm supposed to do because law school seemed like a good idea. When I went on active duty, I wasn't so sure when I got out.
And you're like how old by this time?
Probably 26.
Yeah,
something like that.
So life is starting to happen to you, and law school is not it.
Yeah, law school just didn't seem like the right thing anymore. So I started a job and met my lovely wife at that job. And she said, you need to do bigger things. So you need to go back to school to figure out how to do bigger things. And I thought, well, I don't know what to go to school for. And so instead of struggling with that for much longer, I thought, well, why do people go to school and why do they work? It's kind of about money, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just study money. So I went and got my MBA with the finance, sort of specialization, and really a focus on nonprofits. But right away, coming out of the military, got into public service. So went to work for the state of Ohio, and eventually became the CFO of a state agency, the state's Department of Administrative Services. It's sort of the job I do now, but for state agencies.
Entire state, yeah.
And did that for better part of 10 years. And one day my wife was now our young daughters were going to preschool, and she took the kids to our local preschool, and a woman at the school said, hey, doesn't your husband do some sort of CFO kind of thing? Our college here in town is looking for a CFO, and we're doing this national search, but maybe he'd be interested. And I could sit on my front porch and see the main administration building to this small private school, Ohio Wesleyan University, a great school. And I thought, I hadn't really thought about doing that, but why not? So I threw my hat in the ring, and long story short, I ended up becoming the CFO at Ohio Wesleyan.
And then from there, Florida.
Well, I worked at Ohio Wesleyan for about 5 years for a wonderful president, Rock Jones. Great place, but I went to Ohio State. My heart was in this sort of notion of a big public university. Yeah. And my wife's parents were aging in Tallahassee, and the idea of spending sort of their twilight years closer to them seemed to be a good idea. And the opportunity came up to go to Florida State University, so I did that. There I was the associate vice president, but the chief financial officer. So had a great run in Tallahassee where we won a football national championship. I got to be on the field for that game and every football game while I was there. And
were you there when OU won the national championship versus Florida State?
We don't really talk about that.
I was there for that game.
If you're a Seminole fan. Yeah. It's funny. I went to Ohio State during a time when they taught you how to hate Florida State,
Yeah.
right? The
Oh, that's
Bobby
funny.
Bowden
Yeah.
just dominating. And so I went to Florida State convinced I would never root for the Seminoles. And boy, they got good Kool-Aid there.
Yeah.
You drink the Kool-Aid, and before you know it, you're one of them.
Well, when I went to OU, I was like, I'm never going to root for OU. I'm an A&M guy. And like about 3 years into it, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of like 50-50. And then like, well, 5 years later, you're like, hey, Boomer Sooner, right?
Yeah.
And so, or whatever the Seminoles do.
So had been at Florida State for a couple of years, and my boss actually had been the CFO at Texas Tech. And his former boss, the president of Texas Tech, was heading up the search for the CFO at Texas State University. And my boss came into me one day and said, love you, Eric, and you can stay here forever. It makes my job easier, but you really should be back in the CFO seat.
Yeah.
You should. And I don't know if you've heard of Texas State. Honestly, I had not.
Yeah.
He said, you need to learn about Texas State. This is the job. This not only is the job for you, it is the job anybody should want right now, because great things are happening at Texas State. And I looked into it, and sure enough, was just blown away by what I saw happening now 10 years ago. I've been here for 10 years now, and August 1st will be 10 years. And it's been a wonderful 10 years. I love it more today than even what I thought I might when I was looking and learning about it then.
So let's talk about, the changes you've seen in 10 years. And so certainly administration's changed, but I think a lot of alumni look at the university and they think the physical university's changed, but I think it's been more than just the physical part of it. It has changed. It's gotten bigger, more buildings and so on. It's funny, there's one of the buildings in campus was originally intended to be the end of campus, and now it's like 1/3 of the way across, and that's actually, we're going to deal with that in the master plan. But the university is changing beyond the physical part of it, and you've probably seen a bit of that as well, the research and the profile of the students who are coming here as well.
It's funny, when I took the job, I called, I have a stepbrother and stepsister that grew up here in Austin, so I knew the area. We had come here for vacations when I was a kid, and have stayed connected with them over the years. And so I called my stepbrother, Judd, and I said, Judd, I'm taking this job at Texas State. And he said, well, that's where I graduated.
Oh, really? That's funny.
And my stepsister, Jessica, also graduated. So he graduated the last year that it was SWT. She graduated 2 years later as Texas State. And so I got lots of immediate feedback on some of these changes. Texas State is a university, probably more so than many in the country, that has gone through a lot of change over the past several decades. To go from primarily being known as sort of a teacher school to today being on the cusp of being one of the top research universities in the country. One thing that I feel really happy about is what hasn't changed at Texas State, and that's the fact that we remain so student-focused and so focused on giving our students a life experience that's going to lead them to bigger and better things. It's why I'm the CFO. I deal with finance and facilities and human resources, but I'm constantly reminding all of my employees and everyone I talk to that all of us here have the same job.
Yeah.
And that's to create these great young people and spread them out into the world to do great things. So the creation and dissemination of knowledge. So creating knowledge through research, and we've just exploded. Really to go from probably single digits in the millions of research when I got here to today, 165 million and counting in research on an annual basis. I will say, and I'll segue this into the master plan conversation, it is the thing that is causing us the most growing pains. When you look at the space that we need for the future of Texas State, the biggest shortage is in the area of research and having the kinds of labs we need to do world-class research.
We've been talking about strategic planning, and every university has a plan for what they're going to do with the entirety of, becoming an R1 institution or focusing on student success and all these things that we have in our strategic plan. But I don't think people pay a lot of attention to master plans. But we just got approval from the regents who just approved our master plan. We spent, almost 2 years working on a plan with meetings with students and faculty and staff and alumni and townspeople and so on, trying to imagine what the future of Texas State looks like physically. And what we developed, and I say we on purpose because it's not me, it's not you, but what we corporately developed, I think is pretty remarkable, and actually it will be quite beautiful when it's done. And you've been really good about saying this. These aren't just wishing things that we hope might happen someday. We haven't proposed things that will never happen. These things actually can happen and probably will happen, and in phases. It's not going to happen all at one time. But there's some remarkable things we're going to do here, and it will allow us to do things in the new university that we can't do now. And you mentioned research in particular, but there's other areas as well. So when you look back at the creation of the master plan, what are some like maybe areas that you're thinking like that's going to be like really important, but then that's important too? Like, what are some like areas that you think are general categories of change that you think will be game changers for Texas State?
I'm so glad that you talk about we. We had over 5,000 interactions with people as we built this plan.
I remember people walking around with like little dots and putting
town
dots
halls
on pictures
and open meetings and meetings at San Marcos Town Hall and meetings up in Round Rock, and wonderful process to get all of that feedback. And there are lots of people with great ideas, and I think we've distilled those down. Some highlights for me are a complete renewal of Spring Lake and Sewell Park.
Yeah.
One of the things, that you might, I think people would rightfully ask is, where's the money going to come from to do all of these projects? A lot of we've been very thoughtful about identifying deferred maintenance needs, things that have to be fixed anyway. Yeah. We have to make these investments, and we're lucky to be in the state of Texas where the state gives us some funding to help do this. And we can use those funds to repair things, to put them back in a way that is much better than they are today. So as we do, for example, utilities renewal, we have to replace steam pipes under a road. Well, you can put that road back as a pedestrian walkway or as a beautiful green space, those kinds of things. We're being very smart about how we do this. But a complete and total renewal of Spring Lake and Sewell Park to highlight the fact that we're sitting on one of the treasures of Texas, if not the country. When you look at that area around Spring Lake, it is absolutely amazing. And with our leadership in water research, we need to sort of show off the fact that we own one of the largest freshwater springs in the world. And that's the headwaters to a river that comes out of the ground on our campus. So we're really excited about all of the things at Spring Lake and Sewell Park. Equally interesting to me is the heart of our campus, that area around the Alkek Library, today where the quad meets on one side and the mall on the other side by the LBJ Student Center. Today there are over 30 staircases in that area. It is concrete and a lot of stairs. And this new plan will remove most of those stairs and a lot of that concrete to reintroduce a significant amount of green space back into the heart of our campus in a really accessible way where you'll be able to move through there much easier than you can today. I'll just highlight the project that you mentioned, what was supposed to be the end of the Texas State campus. Derrick Hall was built to be the bookend to our campus. Today it's
from
only
Old Main to Derrick.
Old Main to Derrick. That was all of Texas State. Today it's not only 1/3 of the way across the campus. We'll be removing that bookend and opening up the quad. That is going to be transformational. Those pictures in the master plan of what that is going to look like will blow you away. Yeah. And the last thing I'll mention is the creation of our Hilltop Village, where for some folks who remember living on campus years ago, where Arnold, Smith, Hornsby, and Burleson halls used to be, those halls have all been removed. And we have 25, so those were about 300 rooms. We have 2,500 rooms going back in that place. These are 10-story high-rise buildings, a new dining hall, a new green space and park-like environment that will be right at the front door of the library and the student center. Yeah. The heart of campus that will become a vibrant residential district. it's going to change the way Texas State feels when you come to visit.
I know one of your favorite projects is the Bobcat Trail, because you've been talking about that since I got here, and we're starting to see it come to fruition now, where you can walk from the soccer fields to basically Old Main in one continuous loop when this gets done. But I know you're really fond of that project.
And to take that same idea all the way over to Spring Lake, to be able to go from Blanco Hall on the western edge of our campus all the way to Spring Lake with one continuous pedestrian spine, over a mile in length. I mean, there just aren't a lot of universities that can make that sort of a claim. It's ambitious, but we're going to get there, and it's going to be beautiful.
Now, you haven't talked about the most important thing people want, and that's more parking.
Yes.
That's coming, though, right?
We decided we won't have parking.
No more
anymore.
parking.
No. So the master plan calls for 3 new parking garages and multiple parking lots.
Yeah.
It is interesting, though, because some of our growth is going to be online. So the parking crunch as we continue to grow at Texas State, I don't think it gets significantly worse, but we need parking to sort of catch up to where we're going to be. So yes, there will be more parking added. And I just add, Kelly, that not everybody gets everything they want in a master plan, right? I went into the master plan convinced that the master plan needed to have streetcars.
Yeah. I wanted gondolas.
And you wanted gondolas. And neither of those things are in the master plan.
Well, you kind of like throw everything at the wall and see what's going to stick. And by the way, speaking of parking, we've got one parking lot coming on pretty quickly, the Thorpe Lane one, right?
Yeah, it should open by this fall, an additional 500 parking spaces for our commuters specifically. That's going to make that ability to come as a commuter to park easily and quickly and get a quick ride over to campus. And if you can just get here 30 minutes ahead of when your class starts, you're going to be in good shape.
You can get from the parking lot to your classroom in 30 minutes, guaranteed.
Yeah.
So
don't drive around looking for a spot where there aren't any.
So parking is coming. You mentioned the Hilltop housing area, so we'll have 2,500 new. We already have 1,000, then another 1,500 beds coming. Castro Hall coming. That's 1,000 beds there. That's pretty much the end of housing.
Yeah, that'll get us pretty close to 12,000 beds on campus, which we think is about the right size for us to house our freshman class with RAs and just a little bit of room for others. For example,
graduate students, for example.
Bobcat Village is a place we've thought probably makes more sense for graduate students or upperclassmen. So we think 12,000 is sort of the natural pausing point where we may be where we need to end up in terms of housing on the San Marcos campus. Housing at Round Rock, that's down the road. We think it's going to happen, but a little bit further away.
We've been talking a lot about San Marcos, but there's other locations where we're planning as well. So it is a master plan. So we've got Round Rock. We're building Esperanza Hall. That's our 4th big building there. But we've got plans for 10,000 students there. So we've got a plan for Round Rock as well.
Yeah, and some great pictures and images of what that's going to be as well. By
the way, the pictures are unbelievable about what this place will look like. I hope it actually looks like that. But they are pieces of works of art, and they really look really good. That picture of what you want to do below Old Main on the JCK side of Old Main with the kind of the public gathering space, unbelievable. That's people used to gather there back in the in the early 1900s. Yeah,
on the side of Chautauqua Hill, right just below Old Main. Today, that area has turned into essentially a parking lot. Yeah. And you've made this statement previously that that's probably the project you're most excited about in the plan. I invite everybody to go take a look at it. We're calling it Bobcat Landing, but I think we got to get more creative than just another Bobcat something. Yeah. But that hillside below Old Main will become just one of the most iconic and breathtaking spots at any university in the country. And it's that we hope is probably a year or two away.
That spot there, and then looking at LCAC back towards Old Main where you can see the whole quad where that kind of opens up there will be unbelievable. Maybe we'll call it Algoe Landing. How about that?
Let's not go that far.
Algoe Memorial, maybe. All right, Eric. We also have another part of the podcast. Every week, listeners send in questions for me, and so you get to be the podcast host now and ask me a question. I'm not seeing the question. I have no idea what it is.
All right, Kelly. What is a daily ritual or routine for you that feels non-negotiable?
Wow, that's a good one. I actually this is very personal, and I don't think I've ever really shared this very much, but I have I think all of us have our thing that is who we are, and that's not part of our public persona, not part of our job. But I'm actually a pretty spiritual person, and if I'm not careful, the day can get away from me, and I'll have not engaged in that part of my life. And I like to have a holistic approach to me. And what I've discovered is if I wait to do that at the end of the day when I'm the most tired or the most busy, that I can't do that, or I'll forget to do it, and I'll miss that part of who I am. And so, to me, it's the morning routine of just me thinking about what the day is to come, but also thinking about me and my relationship with others, which is also very important to me, and kind of like a spiritual preparation for the day. So to me, it's the morning routine. And what's actually interesting is that Beth actually gets up a little earlier than I do. I go to bed really late, and she gets up early. So it's just me by myself back in the back bedroom, kind of getting ready, and I'm in a kind of a constant moment of prayer, thinking about not praying like in the traditional sense, but thinking about the day that's to come, preparing for it, and then trying to get my head straight for the day. And so that's kind of that's become the way I start the day. Like, I don't eat breakfast. I don't have to spend my time combing my hair anymore because I've got the short hairdo that I'm sporting right now. But that's how I kind of clear my head. And if I don't do it, if I get rushed in the day and don't do it, I feel like I've missed something. So that's probably it. What about you?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned staying up late, because for those of you who are listening or watching that don't know this about Kelly, a lot of us are convinced he doesn't sleep at all. He does 26 hours a day of work, so it's pretty amazing. For me, the prayerfulness thing is something that luckily I don't have to think too much about myself, because my mom sends me a Facebook message every day.
Oh, is that right?
Asking, have you prayed today?
Oh, that's funny.
For me, it's probably making sure that I find time to connect with my wife, my partner. 28 years we've been married, and it's one of those things. Especially our 3 daughters now have all left the house, and you can sort of get in a routine, and if
you're just roommates.
You're
right?
just roommates, yeah. And to be thoughtful and purposeful, not to let that happen, to find time to connect every day is something that's important to me.
Yeah, that's great. I love to hear that. Thank you for sharing that very personal insight, and thank you for joining us here on The Current. It's always great to learn more about what's happening here at Texas State. It's a complicated place. 41,000 students, 5,000 or 6,000 employees. It's hard to keep track of all of them. Eric you have to keep track of all of them. But thank you, Eric, for joining us. Thank you for joining us as well. Until next time, States up, everyone.